She cried when the rancher pulled the iron arrow from her chest, until she realized he was bleeding. The red plains of Kestrel 9 looked calm from far away, like a quiet ocean of dust and grass under a copper sky. But anyone who lived out here knew the truth. The wind could cut like a blade, the storms could swallow whole fences, and the night sometimes carried lights that did not belong to any star. Elia's crow rode the fence line at dusk, moving slow and steady the way a rancher should. His mount was not a horse, not exactly. It was a lean, six-legged range beast locals called a drifter. It had the patience of a mule and the eyes of a hawk, and it did not spook at sudden sounds the way earth horses did. Elias liked that. He had built his ranch where most people would not. The land sat near the Black Spur Ridge, a jagged line of rock that marked the border of an old forbidden zone. Settlers said the place was cursed. Prospectors said there was hidden tech buried in the stone. The company maps showed nothing but warning symbols. Elias did not talk about why he chose it. He only worked. He checked a broken post, fixed a loose wire, and watched his herd, massive horned grazers called thunderbacks, shuffle and snort in the distance. Their hides glowed faintly in the evening light, as if the planet's dust had soaked into their skin. The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet that made a person hear their own thoughts too clearly. Elias was turning back toward the house when the wind changed. It did not just blow harder, it felt wrong. It smelled like burned metal and rain that never touched the ground. The drifter's ears flicked, its claws dug into the dirt. A storm was coming. Kestrel storms were not like Earth storms. They did not just bring sand. Sometimes they carried static that made radios scream and lights blink. Sometimes they brought whispers like the sky had learned to talk. Elias pulled his collar up and guided the drifter toward home. That was when he saw something dark near the fence, half buried in dry grass. At first he thought it was a fallen gate or a piece of tarp torn loose. Then the shape moved, slow and shaky. A person. Elias swung down and stepped closer, boots crunching on grit. The figure lay curled against the fence posts like someone had tried to crawl and simply ran out of strength. It was a woman. Her clothes were coated in dust, the color of the red plain. Her hair stuck to her face, and her breathing came in thin, uneven pulls. Elias crouched beside her, careful not to startle her if she woke. Then he saw the iron arrow. It was embedded in her chest, just below her collarbone. The shaft was dark metal, not wood, and it looked old and new at the same time, ancient shape, clean edges. Thin markings ran along it like writing. The arrow did not belong to any rancher or settler. Elias knew most weapons on Kestrel 9. This was not one of them. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were sharp, a pale gray that caught the last light of the day. Her gaze locked on Elias and panic flashed across her face. "No," she whispered. Her voice was rough, like she had been running for hours. Don't touch it." Elias kept his hands visible, open, and calm. "You're on my fence line," he said. "Storm's coming. You'll freeze out here." She tried to push herself up, but her body refused. The arrow shaft trembled with her movement, and she cried out, a small, broken sound that was more fear than pain. Elias looked around. The plains stretched empty, but emptiness out here could lie. "Who did this?" he asked, her lips pressed together. She swallowed hard. "They're close," she said. "If they find me, they'll take me." Elias heard the wind pick up again. A low moan moved through the ridge, like the rock itself was warning him. He made a decision. "I'm taking you in," he said. She shook her head quickly, then winced. "You don't understand," she whispered. I understand storms," Elias said, "and I understand bleeding. You're not staying out here." Her eyes widened as he moved closer. "Please," she said, and her voice cracked. "If you pull it out, I'll die." Elias paused. He had seen arrows before. He knew how bodies worked. But this arrow looked wrong, and her fear felt real. He leaned in, studying it. The metal hummed so softly he almost thought it was his own pulse. The markings along the shaft seemed to shift when the light hit them, like they were trying to hide. Elias did not like that, but he liked the idea of leaving someone to die even less. He scooped her up gently, keeping her upper body steady so the arrow did not move. She went stiff in his arms, shaking with effort to stay awake. The drifter lowered itself, trained to carry weight. Elias secured the woman against the saddle frame with a blanket and rope, careful not to press the wound. Her breathing was shallow but steady. They reached the ranch house as the first edge of the storm rolled over the plains. The house was simple. Thick walls, a low roof, solar panels, a water recycler, and a barn that held tools older than the planet's newest laws. A safe house built by someone who believed the world could turn dangerous with no warning. Elias carried her inside and laid her on the main table. He turned on the lamps and their warm light pushed the darkness back. The woman's eyes darted around the room, taking in everything. Her gaze stopped on the rifle above the hearth. Then it moved to the old radio on the shelf, the kind that could still catch faint signals if the storms allowed it. "You live alone," she murmured. Elias did not answer. He grabbed his med kit from a cabinet and set it down. He cleaned the area around the arrow carefully. The skin around it was swollen, but the bleeding was not heavy. That was strange. An arrow like that should have done more damage, or maybe it was designed not to. That thought made his jaw tighten. The woman's hand gripped his sleeve. "Don't," she whispered again. "It binds." "What binds?" Elias asked. She swallowed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned her face away like she hated showing fear. "The arrow," she said. "It marks, it calls." Elias frowned. "Calls what?" But the storm hit hard and the house shook. The lights flickered. Outside, the wind screamed against the walls, throwing sand like a million tiny stones. Elias had seconds to decide whether the woman would survive through the night with the arrow in place. He checked her pulse. Too fast. He checked her breathing. Too shallow. Her lips had begun to pale. "She's going into shock," he muttered to himself. He had seen this before on the frontier, a wound that looked quiet, but the body was failing anyway. Elias prepared a stabilizer injection and gave it to her carefully. She gasped as the cold medicine entered her system. Her eyes locked onto his again. "If you pull it," she said, "you'll regret it." Elias met her gaze, steady and serious. "If I don't pull it," he said, "you won't make it." He set clamps and bandages beside her. He took a deep breath and gripped the arrow shaft with steady hands. The metal felt colder than it should, like it had been sitting in deep space. "On three," he said. She nodded once, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not from drama, but from pure fear. "One," Elias said. The storm roared. "Two." The lights flickered again. "Three." Elias pulled. The arrow slid free with a smoothness that did not make sense. There was no resistance, no tearing. It was as if the arrow had been waiting for his hands. The woman cried out, then sobbed, pressing her hand to the bandage Elias quickly applied. Her shoulders shook. She looked small suddenly, like the world had taken everything from her and still demanded more. Elias tightened the wrap and spoke low, calm. "Breathe," he said. "In. Out, you're here, you're safe." She shook her head, half laughing, half crying. "Safe," she whispered. "No one is safe." Elias turned to discard the arrow into a metal tray. That was when the pain hit him. It started like a sting in his palm, then spread fast up his arm, sharp and burning under the skin. Elias sucked in a breath and grabbed the edge of the table. For a moment he thought he had cut himself. Then he looked down. A thin line of blood seeped from the center of his palm, right where he had touched the arrow. It was not a deep cut. It looked more like a needle prick, but it was bleeding, and his hand felt numb. Elias stared at it, confusion and anger mixing in his chest. The woman saw it too. Her crying stopped instantly. Her face went still and her eyes widened as if she had just watched a door close forever. "No," she whispered. Elias flexed his fingers. The numbness crawled farther, like cold water moving through his veins. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. The woman's lips trembled. "It transfers," she said. "The arrow binds to the one who removes it." Elias clenched his jaw. "So it's poison." "It's more than poison," she whispered. "It's a call, a debt." Elias ripped a strip from his shirt and wrapped it around his palm, pressing hard. Blood still seeped through the cloth. He looked at the arrow in the tray. The markings along it were brighter now, faintly glowing like embers under ash. Outside, through the small window, the storm's dust flashed with distant light, like a moving lantern far out on the plains. Elias stared. Those were not lightning strikes. The lights were too steady, too low. Someone was out there, walking through the storm as if it meant nothing. The woman sat up, ignoring her own pain, and looked toward the window. Her face turned pale. "They found it," she whispered. "They felt the pull." Elias forced himself to stand straight, even as the numbness in his arm spread. He reached for his rifle and checked the chamber. He did not know who was coming or what the arrow truly was, but he knew one thing: if they came for her, they would have to come through him first. And now, by pulling the iron arrow free, he was no longer just a rancher on the edge of nowhere. He was part of the hunt. Part 1 ends with the storm raging, the rancher secretly weakening, and strange lights moving closer through the red dust toward the ranch house. The storm did not calm through the night. Red dust struck the ranch house walls like waves hitting stone. The wind howled around the corners, carrying sharp grains that scratched against windows and roof panels. Inside, the lamps flickered, throwing long shadows across the room. Elia's crow stood near the window, rifle in hand, watching the distant lights move slowly through the storm. They were real. 3 shapes, low to the ground, gliding instead of walking. Their faint glow cut through the dust like silent stars drifting across the plains. Behind him, the woman struggled to sit upright on the table. Her breathing had improved since the arrow was removed, but pain still held her shoulders stiff. "You should rest," Elia said without turning. She shook her head. "They won't stop," she said softly. "Not until they take me back." Elias glanced at her. "Who are they?" She hesitated. The question hung between them like a heavy curtain. "My name is Lyra," she said finally, "and the people coming, they aren't simple hunters. They serve buyers from off-world." Elias frowned. "Corporation types?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Some call them collectors, some call them thieves. They look for old power, ancient things buried under worlds like this." Elia's eyes shifted toward the floor, toward the land beneath his ranch. "You think they're here for something under my ground?" he said. Her silence answered him. Outside, one of the glowing shapes stopped moving. Its light grew brighter for a moment, like it was scanning the area. Elias felt the strange numbness in his arm spread slightly. He flexed his fingers, hiding the movement. Lyra noticed anyway. "You shouldn't be standing," she said. "The arrow—" "I've had worse," Elias said quietly. She studied him carefully, seeing the stubborn strength behind his calm face. It was not pride that kept him upright. It was habit, survival. "Why help me?" she asked after a moment. Elias shrugged lightly. "You were dying on my fence line." "That's not enough reason," she said. He did not answer. Instead, he walked toward a cabinet and pulled out an old scanner device. Its screen flickered as he activated it. The signal lines jumped wildly because of the storm, but faint shapes appeared on the display. "They're close," he muttered. Lyra swung her legs off the table slowly. "You need to listen to me," she said. "The arrow marks its target. When you removed it, the signal changed. Now they know exactly where we are." Elias nodded once. "Then we don't wait." He moved toward the back of the room and pressed his hand against a hidden panel. With a low mechanical sound, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. Lyra's eyes widened. "You have tunnels?" she asked. "Old mining shafts," Elias said. "I sealed most of them, but some still connect under the ridge." He grabbed supplies quickly, water packs, medgel, extra ammo. His movements were efficient, practiced. Lyra watched him. "You knew this land wasn't normal," she said. Elias paused for a second. "I know the ground hums at night," he said simply. "And sometimes machines I didn't build try to wake up." Her breath caught. "You've seen the structure," she said. "Parts of it," Elias answered. The storm roared louder, and suddenly a sharp beam of light swept across the window. They had arrived. Elias shut off the lamps instantly, plunging the room into dim, red emergency lighting. A low mechanical hum filled the air outside. Lyra stepped closer to him. "They use trackers," she whispered. "They'll search every corner." Elias gestured toward the open stairway. "Down," he said. They moved quickly into the tunnel. Elias sealed the floor hatch behind them, leaving the house above silent and empty. The underground air was cool and dry. Narrow lights embedded in the walls flickered to life as motion sensors activated. Lyra looked around, amazed. This was not just an old mine. Smooth metal panels blended with natural rock. Strange lines of faded symbols ran along the walls, glowing faintly when she passed. "The structure recognizes you," she said quietly. Elias glanced at her. "I don't know what it recognizes." The tunnel sloped downward, twisting beneath the ranch. The sound of footsteps echoed softly as they moved deeper. Behind them, faint vibrations traveled through the rock. "They're inside your house," Lyra said. Elias kept walking. "What exactly did the arrow do?" he asked after a while. Lyra hesitated. "It creates a bond," she said. "Not just tracking, it connects life signs. The one who removes it becomes linked to the target." Elias' jaw tightened. "So I'm part of this now?" "Yes," she said softly. "And I'm sorry." He waved it off. "Apologies won't slow poison," he said. She looked at his hand. The veins along his wrist had darkened slightly. Guilt crossed her face. "You saved me," she said quietly, "and now you suffer because of it." Elias stopped walking. He turned toward her, his expression calm but firm. "Out here," he said, "people help each other. That's how we survive. Don't make it bigger than it is." Lyra nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed heavy with worry. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber. Lyra gasped. The room stretched farther than the ranch house above. Massive curved walls rose into shadow. At the center stood a circular platform covered in glowing lines. Ancient machines rested silently around it, shaped in designs that looked both organic and mechanical. Elias had seen this place before, but only from a distance. Now the air vibrated with quiet energy. The symbols along the walls began to glow brighter as Lyra stepped forward. A soft tone filled the chamber. She froze. "It's responding," she whispered. Light flowed across the floor like water, moving toward her feet. Elias felt a pressure in his chest, as if the air itself was watching. "What is this place?" he asked. Lyra swallowed. "My people call it a guardian core," she said. Long ago it protected the balance of this world, but when settlers arrived, it went silent. The light circled her slowly, then flared briefly. A projection appeared in the air, shifting shapes and symbols forming patterns that neither of them fully understood. Outside, a distant explosion echoed through the tunnels. Elias turned toward the entrance. "They're searching underground now," he said. Lyra looked back at him. "If they reach this chamber, they'll try to take control," she said. "And once activated, it could change everything on this planet." Elias raised his rifle. "Then we don't let them." The lights in the chamber grew brighter. The ancient structure had awakened. And somewhere beyond the tunnels, the hunters moved closer, guided by the invisible bond created when the rancher pulled the iron arrow free. Part 2 ends with the hidden chamber activating, the bond between them growing stronger, and danger closing in from every direction. The chamber beneath the ranch was alive. Soft light moved across the curved walls like flowing water. Symbols glowed and faded, forming patterns that seemed to breathe. A low hum filled the air, steady and calm, like the heartbeat of something ancient waking from a long sleep. Lyra stood near the center platform, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Elias stayed close behind her, rifle ready, eyes scanning the shadows. He felt weaker. The numbness in his arm had spread up toward his shoulder. His breathing felt heavier, but he hid it well. Years on the frontier had taught him how to keep moving even when pain whispered otherwise. "What is it doing?" he asked quietly. Lyra watched the lights move around her feet. "It's recognizing me," she said. "Testing, maybe." The air shimmered, and suddenly a thin beam of light rose from the floor. It formed a floating image above the platform, not a clear picture, but shifting shapes that hinted at landscapes, creatures, and stars. Elias lowered his rifle slightly, surprised. "This place wasn't built by settlers," he said. "No," Lyra whispered. "Long before them." She stepped forward carefully. The light reacted instantly, spreading outward in rings. Symbols changed color, becoming brighter, more active. A soft sound echoed through the chamber, almost like a voice speaking without words. Elias felt a strange pressure in his chest again, like the room was studying him. He winced suddenly, gripping his arm. Lyra turned quickly. "You're getting worse," she said. "I've been worse," he replied, though his voice sounded tight. She moved closer and gently took his wrist, checking the dark veins spreading under his skin. "The arrow's poison is moving fast," she said. "It's not meant to kill quickly. It weakens, binds, drains." Elias gave a small half-smile. "Well, that sounds friendly." Her expression softened despite the tension. "You joke," she said, "but this is serious." "I know," he said quietly. A sudden vibration ran through the floor. Both of them froze. Footsteps echoed faintly from the tunnel behind them. "They found the entrance," Lyra whispered. Elias lifted his rifle again. "How many?" he asked. She closed her eyes briefly, as if listening beyond normal hearing. "At least 4," she said. "Maybe more behind them." Elias nodded once. "We need cover." They moved toward a row of old structures along the chamber wall, half machines, half stone pillars. The glowing light dimmed slightly, as if sensing tension. The footsteps grew louder, metal boots on stone. Voices, distorted through helmets, echoed into the chamber. "There," one of them said. "Energy spike confirmed." 3 armored figures stepped into view. Their suits were dark and sleek, glowing lines running along their shoulders. Each carried advanced weapons that hummed quietly. Behind them came a taller figure wearing a cloak over armor, the leader. His helmet reflected the chamber lights like cold mirrors. "Well," he said calmly, "the signal brought us exactly where we needed to be." Lyra stepped forward despite Elia's warning glance. "You shouldn't be here," she said. The leader tilted his head slightly. "You always say that," he replied, "and yet here we are." Elias shifted his stance, placing himself slightly in front of her. The leader noticed immediately. "And who is this?" he asked. "A rancher playing hero. Just someone who doesn't like trespassers," Elias said. The leader chuckled softly. "You removed the arrow," he said. "Interesting, most die within minutes." Elias said nothing. The man raised one hand slightly and the armored hunters spread out. "We don't need conflict," the leader continued. "Give us the girl and we leave your ranch untouched." Lyra shook her head. "They won't leave anything untouched," she whispered to Elias. He already knew that. "No deal," Elias said calmly. The leader sighed. "I hoped you'd be reasonable." One of the hunters raised a weapon. Before he could fire, the chamber reacted. A sudden pulse of light burst from the floor, pushing everyone back slightly. Symbols flashed bright gold. Lyra gasped. "It's protecting," she said. The leader's interest sharpened. "So it responds to you," he said quietly. "Excellent." He stepped closer despite the glowing barrier. "We only want access," he said. "This world has power buried under it, power that could reshape entire systems." "This place is not yours," Lyra said firmly. "Ownership is a matter of strength," he replied. Elias felt anger rise in his chest. He fired a warning shot into the floor near the man's boots. The sound echoed loudly. "That's your last step," Elias said. The hunters immediately raised their weapons. Tension filled the chamber like a storm about to break. Lyra looked between them, thinking fast. If fighting started here, the structure might be damaged, or worse, captured. She stepped onto the center platform. The light flared instantly. "Wait," she said loudly. Everyone paused. "If you want access," she said to the leader, "then watch." She closed her eyes and placed both hands into the glowing lines. The chamber responded. A deep tone filled the air. The walls came alive with moving images, ancient scenes of this world before settlers arrived. Vast plains untouched. Giant machines guarding balance. Energy flowing like rivers beneath the ground. Elias watched in awe, the leader's breathing slowed. "Beautiful," he murmured. Then the images changed. They showed destruction, systems failing when outsiders tried to control them, energy turning unstable, entire landscapes collapsing. Lyra opened her eyes. "It cannot be owned," she said. "Only protected." The leader's voice turned cold. "Everything can be owned." He signaled his hunters. They fired. Elias reacted instantly, pulling Lyra aside as energy blasts struck the platform. The chamber responded again, beams of light rising like shields blocking further shots. Chaos filled the room. Elias fired back, forcing the hunters to take cover. His movements were slower now, the poison weakening him, but his aim stayed steady. Lyra realized the only way to stop this was to fully activate the Guardian system, but doing so meant revealing herself completely. She looked at Elias. He nodded once, as if reading her thoughts. "Do it," he said. She turned back to the platform and placed her hands deeper into the light. The chamber roared alive. Energy surged upward, wrapping around her like flowing ribbons. The hunters hesitated, unsure. The leader stared, fascinated and furious at the same time. "You would awaken it fully?" he asked. Lyra did not answer. Light burst across the walls and ancient machines began to move. Part 3 ends as the Guardian structure fully awakens, Lyra transforming into the system's chosen protector while Elias struggles against the spreading poison, and the final confrontation becomes unavoidable. Light filled the ancient chamber like a rising sunrise. Energy flowed around Lyra, moving in slow circles like living ribbons. Symbols burned bright across the walls, forming patterns older than memory. The air vibrated with quiet power. Elias watched from behind a broken pillar, breathing harder now. The poison inside him felt heavier. His arm trembled slightly and cold sweat touched his forehead. Still, he kept his rifle steady, eyes focused on the hunters. The leader stepped forward despite the glowing barriers. "You don't understand what you are doing," he said calmly. "This power could change worlds." Lyra's voice echoed strangely as she spoke, as if two voices spoke together. "It protects balance," she said, "not control." The leader shook his head. "Balance is just another word for weakness." He raised his weapon again. Before he could fire, the chamber reacted. Light burst outward from the platform, forming a wave that forced the hunters back. Their weapons flickered and dimmed as if drained. Elias felt the energy brush past him too. Instead of pushing him away, it felt warm, almost gentle. Lyra turned toward him. Her eyes glowed faintly now, not in a frightening way, but like starlight reflected on water. "The system sees you," she said softly. Elias frowned. "I didn't ask it to." "You removed the arrow," she said. "You took the burden willingly." It recognizes sacrifice. The leader laughed bitterly. Machines recognizing sacrifice? That is only programming. He signaled his hunters again. They moved forward, trying to push through the glowing barrier. The chamber responded by shifting the ground slightly, raising curved walls between them. Ancient defenses were waking, but Elias knew something. They won't stop, he said quietly. Lyra nodded. No, she agreed. She stepped fully into the center of the platform. Light rose higher, wrapping around her like a shield. Images flashed across the air, old guardians standing watch over the planet, settlers arriving, years of silence and now awakening again. Elias suddenly dropped to one knee. Pain shot through his chest. Lyra noticed instantly. Elias, she called. He waved her off, forcing himself back up. I'm still standing, he said, but the poison had spread far now. His breathing came shallow and slow. Lyra felt fear tighten in her chest. She had seen many people die from the arrow's bond. The one who removed it always paid a price. The leader saw Elias weaken and smiled. You see, he said, helping others only brings loss. Elias lifted his rifle again. Maybe, he said calmly, but it's still the right thing. The leader's expression hardened. Enough, he said. He activated a device on his wrist. A pulse of energy shot forward, striking the platform. The chamber shook violently. Lights flickered. Lyra gasped as the energy around her destabilized. The hunters pushed forward again, forcing their way closer. Elias realized what was happening. They're overloading it, he said, trying to force control. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing deeply. I can stabilize it, she said, but I need time. Elias nodded once. Then I'll buy it. He stepped out from cover and fired with calm precision, forcing the hunters to spread out. His movements were slower now, but every shot counted. The leader turned toward him. You cannot win, he said. Elias smiled faintly. I don't need to win, he replied. Just need to slow you down. A hunter fired toward him, and Elias rolled behind a pillar, breath heavy. The poison burned through him like ice. Still, he stood again. He had protected this ranch for years. He had faced storms, beasts, and loneliness. He would face this too. Behind him, Lyra raised her hands higher. The light responded, flowing stronger. The chamber hummed louder, deeper, like a giant engine awakening fully. Symbols turned gold. Ancient machines lifted from the ground, rotating slowly into place. The leader realized too late. Stop her, he shouted. The hunters rushed forward, but a wall of light rose between them and the platform. Energy surged outward across the chamber and then beyond. Above ground, across the red plains, a wave of light spread from the ranch like a silent storm. Machines hidden beneath the land awakened. Old defense towers rose from the soil. Signals across the hunters' equipment began to fail. Inside the chamber, the leader's weapon flickered and shut down. No, he whispered. Lyra opened her eyes. The light around her softened. It's done, she said. The chamber released one final pulse. The hunter's armor powered down, leaving them unable to fight. The leader fell to one knee, shocked. Elias lowered his rifle slowly. The battle was over. Silence filled the chamber. Lyra stepped down from the platform carefully. The glow faded from her eyes, leaving her looking tired but peaceful. She walked toward Elias quickly. He swayed slightly. Before he could fall, she caught him. You shouldn't have fought, she said softly. He gave a weak smile. You needed time. She looked at his arm. The dark veins had spread far. Fear filled her eyes. I don't think, she began, but stopped. The chamber reacted again. A soft beam of light moved toward Elias, wrapping gently around his injured arm. Warmth spread through him. The burning pain faded slowly. Lyra watched in surprise. It's healing you, she whispered. The bond created by the arrow had changed something. The system recognized Elias not as a threat, but as a protector. The dark color in his veins slowly faded. Elias breathed deeply, relief washing over him. Well, he said quietly, that's new. Lyra laughed softly, tears forming in her eyes. Outside, the storm finally began to calm. Later, as the sun rose over the red plains, the ranch looked peaceful again. The hunters had been taken away by automated guardians, sent off-world with warnings they could not ignore. The ancient structure returned to quiet sleep, not gone, just waiting. Elias stood near the fence line, watching the horizon. Lyra walked toward him. You could leave, he said. Find your people again. She looked at the ranch, at the wide open sky, at the place where someone had chosen to save her without knowing who she was. I think, she said gently, I'll stay for a while. Elias nodded. They stood side by side as the morning light touched the plains. The iron arrow had been melted down and reshaped into a small metal charm hanging near the ranch door, no longer a weapon, but a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the strongest bond begins when someone chooses to bleed first. And under the quiet sky of Kestrel 9, a lonely ranch was no longer lonely. The story ends with peace returning to the frontier, a new partnership forming, and the ancient world watching silently as two protectors stand together.